The key was smaller than I expected. Warm brass, worn smooth as a river stone, and it had been hiding in a tea tin on the highest shelf for longer than I had been alive. I stood in the narrow hallway of my grandmother's cottage, with that little key resting in my open palm, and I looked at the one door I had never, in all my years, seen opened. It was a plain door, white paint gone soft and yellow at the edges, a small keyhole, a brass handle that my grandmother had polished so often it had worn to gold. When I was a child, I used to press my ear against it and listen, certain that something marvelous must be kept inside a room that was always locked. Someday, she would tell me, whenever I asked. She would smooth my hair back from my forehead and smile that slow, secret smile of hers. Someday, little Wren, when the time is right, that door will open for you. And now she was gone, 3 months gone, and the cottage was mine, and the time, it seemed, was right. My hand was not quite steady as I fit the key into the lock. It turned with a soft, buttery click, as though it had been oiled and waiting. And the door swung gently inward into the dark and let out a breath of air that smelled of lavender and old paper and her. But that door can wait a moment longer, because right now, none of it needs to be hurried. Not the key, not the room, not whatever waits inside it. Right now, there is only you and the soft weight of your blanket and the slow, easy rhythm of your own breathing. So let yourself sink a little deeper into the pillow. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let your jaw soften and your hands grow heavy and warm. I'm going to tell you the whole story slowly from the beginning. There is nothing for you to do but listen and drift and let the day fall away behind you. Let me begin. My grandmother's name was Nora, and she lived for more than 50 years in a low stone cottage at the soft green edge of a village, in a house called Wren Cottage, because of the little brown birds that nested every spring in the ivy by the door. I spent every summer of my childhood there. My own parents were busy people, kind but hurried, always halfway to somewhere else. And so from the moment school let out, I would be sent down the winding lanes to Nora, and to the cottage, and to a slower and gentler kind of time. I can still map every inch of that place with my eyes closed. The blue front door that stuck in wet weather. The kitchen with its warm flagstone floor, always a little uneven, so the chairs rocked and you learned which one to choose. The deep window seat where I read 100 books with a cat asleep across my feet. And the locked room, always the locked room at the end of the hall, patient and closed. Nora has been gone since the spring now. She went the way she would have wanted, in her sleep, in her own bed, with the window open and the wrens singing. She was 91. She left me the cottage in her will, and a short note in her careful, looping hand that said only, "The rest you will understand when you find it." I did not know then what she meant. I think perhaps you are beginning to guess. Now take a slow breath with me. In through the nose, gently, and out like a long sigh, letting your whole body grow heavier against the bed. There is no hurry in this story. We are simply going to follow it, the way you might follow a quiet path through a summer meadow, in no rush at all to reach the far gate. I did not open the locked room straight away. I want you to understand that. When you lose someone you love, their house becomes a kind of held breath, and you cannot simply rush through it. You have to move slowly and let each room tell you what it needs to say. So I gave myself the whole of that first autumn. I came down to the cottage on the weekends, and I cleared it the way you eat something warm and good, one slow spoonful at a time. I began with the kitchen, because that was where Nora had lived the most. I washed each cup by hand before I wrapped it. I found her recipes tucked into a biscuit tin, written on the backs of old envelopes, splashed with vanilla, and thumbed soft at the corners. I found the wooden spoon, worn to a slant on one side by 60 years of the same stirring hand. I was not sad exactly, though I cried a little. It was a gentler thing than sadness. It was more like listening to someone tell a long and lovely story, and knowing all the while that you are near the end of it. Breathe in now slowly through your nose, and let it go soft and long, like the last light leaving the sky. I cleared the front room next. The deep chairs, the shelves of soft-spined books, the little clock that had ticked through every summer of my life. I found photographs in a drawer, whole decades of them, curling at the edges. My grandmother young and laughing on a beach. My grandmother and my grandfather Walter, whom I barely remembered, standing in front of the cottage on the day they moved in, impossibly young, holding hands. And in every drawer, in every box, in every quiet corner, I found the same thing again and again. She had kept everything, every card I had ever made her, every pressed flower from every summer walk, a child's drawing of a wren, done in wax crayon, signed by a much smaller version of me, kept for 40 years as though it were a treasure. I began to understand that my grandmother had been, all her long life, a keeper of small and tender things, a woman who believed that nothing given in love was ever really small. It made me remember a thing she used to do on the last evening of every summer visit, before my parents came to fetch me home. She would take me out into the garden in the blue of the dusk, and we would stand very still together, and she would say, "Now, let us gather up the summer so we do not lose it. And I would close my eyes, and she would name the things aloud, one by one. The smell of the warm grass, the sound of the wrens, the taste of the plums we had picked that afternoon, as though a season were something you could hold in your two cupped hands, if only you paid it enough attention. I had thought as a child that it was only a game. I understood now that it had been the whole shape of how she lived. And still, at the end of the hall, the locked room waited. Let your eyes close now, if they haven't already. There is nothing more you need to see, just my voice and the quiet and the slow unspooling of the story. I found the key by accident on a gray afternoon in November. I was reaching for a tin of loose tea on the highest kitchen shelf, standing on the wobbling chair, and my fingers found something behind it. A second tin, older, its paint nearly gone. And when I brought it down and prized off the lid, there it was. The little brass key, wrapped in a scrap of blue felt, with a paper label tied to it in Nora's hand. The label said, "For when you are ready." I stood in that kitchen for a long time, holding it. Outside, the light was going soft and blue, and I thought about all the summers I had pressed my ear to that door, and all the times she had smiled and said someday, and I understood that someday had finally, quietly arrived. I made myself a cup of tea first. I think you would have done the same. And then I walked down the hall in the last of the afternoon light, and I fit the little key into the lock, and I turned it, and the door swung open. Stay with me here in the warm. This is the gentlest part of the story, and I have been saving it for you, waiting until you were good and drowsy, until your body had grown soft and heavy and ready to receive something lovely. The room was small. That was the first surprise. All my life, I had imagined something vast behind that door, and instead, it was a little room, no bigger than a pantry, with one round window that looked out over the back garden and let in a pool of soft, dusty gold. And it was full, not cluttered, never that. Full the way a life is full, full the way a heart is full. There was a writing desk beneath the window, an old one, with a green leather top worn pale in the middle. There were shelves along every wall, and on the shelves were boxes, dozens of them, each one labeled in that same looping hand. And on the desk, waiting, as though she had set it down only that morning, was a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, and on the top one, my name. My knees went soft. I sat down in the little chair, and I drew the bundle into my lap, and I untied the ribbon with hands that had begun, gently, to tremble. Breathe in slow and soft, and out. Feel how heavy your arms have become, how warm. Feel the bed holding you completely, so that you do not have to hold yourself up at all. There is nowhere to be. There is nothing to carry. Just the next quiet word and the next. They were letters to me, every one of them. And as I turned them over in my lap, I saw that they were dated, one after another, going back and back and back, all the way to the year I was born. She had written me a letter every year. On my birthday, each and every year of my whole life, my grandmother had sat down at that little desk in that locked room, and she had written me a letter, and she had never sent a single one. She had kept them here instead, in the dark and the lavender, waiting for the day I would open the door and find them all at once. I read them slowly, in order, from the very first. The earliest was written when I was 1 day old. She wrote about holding me for the first time, about how small my hand was around her finger, about the particular weight of a new person in your arms, and how it rearranges everything you thought you knew about love. She wrote, "Welcome, little wren. I have been waiting my whole life for you, and I did not even know it. I sat in that pool of golden light, and I read my whole life told back to me in my grandmother's voice. The summer I learned to swim. The winter I was afraid of the dark. The year my heart was broken for the first time, which she had known about, though I never told her, and which she had written about with such tenderness that I had to stop and press the letter to my chest and simply breathe. She had been watching over me all along, more closely and more lovingly than I had ever understood. And she had set it all down quietly in a locked room so that one day, when she could no longer tell me herself, I would know. Let yourself drift now. You don't need to follow every word. Let them wash over you like warm water, like the sound of rain on a roof when you are safe and dry beneath it. But the letters were only the beginning of it, because then I began to open the boxes. Each one was a small museum of a life. In one, I found the pressed flowers from her wedding bouquet, sweet peas and forget-me-nots, gone soft and brown, but still holding their shape after 70 years. In another, a lock of my mother's baby hair, tied with the thinnest thread of pink. In another, every letter my grandfather Walter had ever written to her from the years before they married, when he had been away and she had been waiting. There was a box of buttons, of all things, each one wrapped in its own square of paper, and on each paper a few words in her hand telling me whose coat it had come from and when. There was a tin of seashells from a holiday by the sea in a year long before I was born, and there was one small box, no bigger than my hand, that held nothing but a single wren's feather and a note that said, "The first spring in this house, one flew in through the window and would not leave for a week, and Walter said it was a good omen. And so, my darling, it proved to be." I read a few of those, too, though they were not mine, because I could not help it. And in reading them, I learned the loveliest secret of all, the warm thing at the very center of that room, the thing I think my grandmother most wanted me to find. She had almost married someone else. There was a letter near the bottom of the box in which my grandfather Walter confessed that he had very nearly let her go, that he had been too shy, too slow, too certain that a woman as bright as Nora could never want a quiet man like him. And that one evening, at the very last, when she was all but promised to another, he had ridden his bicycle 9 miles through the rain to her father's door, soaked to the skin, and told her plainly that he loved her, and that he would spend his whole life proving it, if only she would have him. And tucked in with that letter in Nora's hand was a small note she had written to herself, or perhaps to me, or perhaps to no one at all. It said, "The whole of my life, this house, your mother, and you, my little wren, all of it began because one quiet man was brave for 90 seconds in the rain. Never believe that a small moment cannot hold a whole world. They almost always do." I sat very still when I read that. Outside, the light had gone from gold to blue to the soft gray of early evening, and I had not moved in hours, and I did not mind at all, because I understood then what the room was. It was not a secret kept from me. It was a gift kept for me. My grandmother had spent her whole long life gathering up every tender thing, every letter and flower and lock of hair, every brave and quiet moment, and she had folded them all carefully into that little room, and she had locked the door, not to keep me out, but to keep it all safe until I was ready to receive it. The rest you will understand when you find it. And I did. I understood all of it now. Breathe in slow and easy, and out slower still. There is nothing left in this story to worry you. Everything in it is safe and warm and kept. I have not changed the room. I want you to know that. I dusted it gently, and I oiled the little lock, and I put fresh lavender in the bowl on the desk. But I left the boxes on their shelves, and Walter's letters in their box, and I added a chair, a second one, small, for a child. Because I have a daughter now, a little one of my own, and she is just beginning to talk, and already she loves the wrens in the ivy by the door. And someday, when the time is right, I will take her small hand in mine, and I will lead her down the hall to the room at the end, and I will tell her, as my grandmother told me, that behind that door is something wonderful. And it will be true. It was always true. I have started writing the letters, you see. One a year on her birthday, in a hand that is beginning, the older I get, to look a little like Nora's. I keep them in the desk, tied with a ribbon, waiting. And I think that is the truest kind of love there is. the kind that gathers quiet things in the dark and keeps them safe, and trusts that one day the right hands will come and find them. That is the whole of it. That is the story of the locked door at the end of my grandmother's hall, and the lifetime of love I found waiting patiently behind it. So let it settle over you now, soft and warm, like a blanket drawn up over your shoulders by someone who loves you. There is nothing you need to find tonight. There is no door to open, no box to lift down, no letter to read. It is all already kept and safe and waiting, and it will keep until the morning. You have only to rest here in the warm dark and let yourself be held. Breathe in slow and soft, and out softer still. Let the next breath be gentler than the last, and the one after gentler still. You are safe. You are warm. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Rest now. Sleep now. I will keep the lavender fresh and the little lamp lit in the window, and the door at the end of the hall standing quietly open for whenever you need somewhere gentle to go. Good night.